you stayed with me, whispering, waiting for the sun, but it shuffled in unnoticed, changing the sky from slate grey to the battleship grey of morning.
Hi everyone, we're joined for Meet the Poet today by Zoë Sîobhan Howarth-Lowe. Zoe has an MA in poetry from Bath Spa University and has had her poetry widely published by the likes of Magma, Ink, Sweat and Tears, Atrium and many other journals and magazines. Her first collection has just been published by Indigo Dreams, which is called A Pocket Full of Stones, and she's had 2 pamphlets published prior to this. There was Love is the Way Bark Grows with Half Moon Books, and I've Grown 2 Hearts with Hedgehog Press. So thank you, Zoe, for joining us on Meet the Poet. It's really great to have you here. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, thank you for having me.
Good, good. I'm really looking forward to hearing your poetry and finding out a bit more about you and your work. But let's go right back to the beginning and talk about how you started writing poetry. Do you remember how it began for you?
I don't remember myself, but my mum tells me I was 5.
Right.
And I wrote some very strange poems. I think my very first one, and I'm doing this from what everybody else has told me, I don't remember it myself, was roses are red, violets are blue, and an apple is covered in snow.
Wow. I like that. Also deviating from the rhyming from a very young age. And so, I mean, that was your first poem.
Yes.
You've come a long way since then. Have you had anyone who sort of supported you along the way or provided some sort of mentorship as you've like written poetry and then begun to publish poetry, or did you do this all by yourself?
Well, I suppose studying at university, I studied poetry, so there was lots of really great tutors there.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of things like tiny UF residentials, things like that, which are all really good.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, so your first reading will be from your first full collection, Pocket Full of Stones. What was the driving force behind this collection?
So this one is so it's a collection that's been growing over many years. Some of them are from as far back as when I was studying university, so they've come over the years, and it's sort of an exploration of always being the weird girl in the corner. Lots of poets have this, and there's some like darker thoughts where you're dealing with things like depression. Then there's some lighter ones, I think, as well. In some of the other collections, I think the lighter ones are, but yeah, it's all about being on the edge of things.
Mm-hmm. That's a great description. I've had obviously a look at these poems already, and I think they're fantastic. So I'm excited to hand over to you and let you read them for us.
So this is the wonderful artwork that Ronnie at Indigo Dreams did for me. I absolutely love what he did with that. And I'm going to start with Train Ride. My grandmother hands me crayons, tells me to draw. I search for pictures, barely able to see out of the window, even kneeling. I draw halves of things. A curve of sheep wool, standing on the scribble of green that I know must be there. The sound of the tracks become a scratch, scratch, scratch. Dark orange crayon scoring out against the green in short, jerky lines. I imagine the lines being chewed up and spat back out by my half sheep. The ocean blows onto my paper as great curls of blue, drowning my half sheep. I turn the page. Watch my grandmother sitting opposite, unaware of my eyes on her as she crunches an apple. I do not know how I should draw her. Draw the suck of the apple breaking or the pattern of her chewing wrinkles. Another one on the grandmother theme. Blusher. In my grandmother's bedroom, I open the curtains, shattering light, sending it quivering and cowering up into the pink corners of the blown vinyl ceiling. There is a mirror on the dressing table that swings on hinges. I push the mirror up as far as it will go, sending my reflection up to join the light, huddled in the corners of the room. I pull open the drawers, search out eyeshadow, blusher, prise open the plastic lids, let the crumbled mixtures spill and disintegrate into the pink fibres of carpet. I smudge myself with powder, use the big brush to daub yellow, magenta and purple onto my collarbones and thighs, mixing them into lovely bruises. And now we move on to one about friendship. Waiting for the sun. You walked with me at 3 a.m, the sky grey and the street empty, your hands cold against mine. We squeezed through locked gates and sat on the squat roof of the crematorium. We would play at holding a séance, our breath rippling the candle flames as we translated the leaf rustle into whispers and poured melted wax over our hands, sealing our friendship with the marks left behind. You stayed with me for hours, squinting our eyes in the darkness, waiting for the morning sun, wanting to watch as it smudged back the shadows and added weight back to the outlines of the world. You stayed with me, whispering, waiting for the sun, but it shuffled in unnoticed, changing the sky from slate grey to the battleship grey of morning. And now the title poem for the collection. A few of these poems take some inspiration from Ophelia, and this is one of them. Pocket full of stones. Leaves breaking through the water's surface, green, brown, the water is autumnal, leaves falling and drifting. The water is shallow, still. It treads me down hard, pressing me into the grit and the dust that creeps up around me and over me, tasting of the smell of wet grass. There is light here, giving shapes to the movements of rocks, twigs and leaves, all of which are drowning with me, pulled in by my clumsy attempt to see what drowning feels like. And now one about magpies. Worrisome. The lone magpie isn't worrisome, sitting on an eave, beak dipping between wing feathers, intent on preening, not knowing that's here, sat alone. People passing take him as a symbol for sorrow. However, the little birds gathered in the frosty trees sat in their cliques, chirruping, which is giggling for birds, tattling as if calling names after the lonely magpie. They are worrisome. This next one is inspired by, my mum used to breed chihuahuas, and when I was a little girl, so whenever one of the dogs was having puppies, I'd have to help because I had tiny hands. Birthing pups. The bitch is birthing in a nest of torn scraps of cloth, blankets, towels, bits of fluff, even belly fur, all scrabbled together, a rat's nest almost. Her collection is smattered with red droplets, pain smearing across the gathered comforts. I sit on the edge of the action, waiting to be called. My tiny fingers fit where no adults can, hooking out trapped limbs, flopping them free, or cleaning tiny mouths, membranous yet pin-sharp teeth already, rubbing limp back to breath, damp sodden fur, little rags, or the worst, loosing the taut cords, slipping them free, only to have her bite too close, small strings of purple, easing out, teasing loose, the knots uncoil, I cannot push them back. And this next one is one of the very first ones I ever went to perform, and it was over at a launch of Magma one year. think it was 2008, a long time ago, watching my aunt. I wanted to learn this new trick, this act of dying that got everyone whispering, hushing over amongst themselves. So I watched her, heard the shallow, quick breaths, watched her arms thinning till I fancied I could see the bleached frame of her bones. I expected her to shrink up, away into nothing, her skin to get so tight that her bones would powder up and her blood spill out, making her fizz and froth over the edges of the bed and down onto the scrubbed floor. I wanted her to crack like a piñata. Let me see the insides, the spark of her, watch it start to dwindle and snuff it out with my finger and thumb. I didn't expect it, but I remember the smell just before the end, like tinned pineapples, sour at the back of my throat. And then one of my favourites to finish. This one was inspired by a front cover that I saw one time of a new scientist in someone's bathroom, about an article about the moon. When NASA finishes mining, there used to be craters on the moon. Now the moon is a crater, carved out, mined of all its juices, it remains derelict. Too light to continue to orbit, it just hangs, skeletal and listless, unable to wax or wane, its cycle broken. Tidal confusion grips the ocean below, trapped, neither flowing in nor out, unable to turn, yet trying to. Turning itself one way, then the next like an uncomfortable sleeper, too hot inside its own shape. I sit, barefooted on night-dewed grass, sniffing out the hot salt of the ocean that cannot rest. The orange-rined moon above. I too am neither one thing nor another. I whisper to the blades of grass, tap on the earth, and wait for the flowers that will never come.
Beautifully read, Zoe. Thank you so much. And they're all stunning poems, but that last poem, I can see why it's one of your favourites. And with that line, I too am neither one thing nor another, that's gorgeous. So I get the impression especially from those first two poems in the reading, that there's like a certain nostalgia to your writing, and your grandmother features in both those two poems as well. I wondered why in particular she recurs in your writing.
I had two grandmas. One was a nana, one was a grandma, and I didn't actually know one of them very well at all. But the other one, my mum's mum, she did live with us for a little while when she was poorly, and we were looking after her. And we did go and care for her every day. So there was a lot of time spent at Nana's house, if that makes sense, or Nana at ours when I was little. So whenever I'm thinking back to that time, she's obviously always in the picture. Yeah,
that makes sense. She's a big part of your childhood. Yeah. And you also mentioned that there's this sort of running theme of Ophelia. I wondered where that came from.
I love to read, and I can't remember when I discovered like Shakespeare and the sonnets and all things like that, but Ophelia always fascinated me. She's just one of them characters that jumped off the page and buries yourself in your brain, and I seem to connect a lot with her because she goes mad and drowns off stage, and the way it's just drowns off stage. They don't really make a big deal of it, but she seems really important to my childhood me when I was reading it for the first time.
That's a really interesting parallel, actually, considering, thinking about she just goes and drowns off stage. Yeah. Comparing that to your book, and it comes in that title poem, Pocket Full of Stones, where you write your clumsy attempt to see what drowning feels like, which I feel represents a lot of the book, because you have this real curiosity towards weighty topics. And I wondered what has drawn you to those darker topics, really.
I've always had really vivid dreams, nightmares. So I was quite a sensitive child. So anything that was slightly dark or scary, like if you see a clip on a film and somebody's dying, or if anybody's getting, I don't like anything where anybody's getting killed, or I'd have horrible nightmares. It could just be a passing comment, or someone could say, oh yeah, such and such died last week.
Yeah.
When you've got a family that's got a lot of the older generation, that comes up a lot, and little age probably shouldn't be listening, but we'd catch little things like that. And so the idea of that would be playing in my brain. And it's also a way to get those nightmares out and onto a page, and hopefully in an attempt that they wouldn't come back. Was sort of how I first approached writing as a little child, was to just try and get rid of these horrible things I would see in my brain when I was trying to sleep.
Yeah. So it was sort of a way of filtering through it, I suppose.
Yeah. I
mean, this might be a strange question, but do you consider yourself a serious person, or is it purely that poetry gives you the format to experiment with those sorts of serious topics?
I would have said that in my family, I tend to be the more serious, let's fix this kind of person. Far more, I don't like the drama that goes on in people's families. I'm like, no, let's just fix it. Let's sort it. Whatever's wrong, I'm there. I'm like, well, here's a solution. Yeah. Or practical, very practical. Yeah. You got troubles with your butt. Well, why don't we just get rid of them and get a new one? Which can be a bit cold sometimes, because I don't always have that emotional connection to things and situations. I'm always there, right? Well, how do we fix it? What's the best outcome to make you happy again? Yeah. So yeah. I guess I'm the more serious, as in I'm the quiet one. I do most of the reading. I was the first person in my family that went away to university. I am a lot younger than my sisters as well, so there's like a 20-year gap between my youngest sister and me. Yeah. So I suppose that always makes you feel a bit awkward, because you're still a little kid and they're grown-ups. So I'm sort of grew up with my nieces and nephews as more my age. Yeah.
And then it would make sense using poetry as that way to sort of to channel that. And I wondered actually, how are those particular poems that, such as Watching My Aunt, how are they usually received? Do they tend to get the best reception? Because people sometimes respond to those darker ideas.
Well, that was the one I did. It was one of the first ones to be published, and I went down to London to Magma to read it out, which was so scary, because I'm actually usually really shy and quiet. And then I thought, poetry, brilliant. You hide behind the page, you write it all down. You don't have to talk to people. And then when you've got a book, they're like, yes, now go out and read it. And I'm like, what? Sorry, pardon. So I remember getting up on stage, and so I was all gothed up, because that's how I dressed when I was a teenager, all in black studded chokers and things like that. And then standing up and reading that, there was quite a lot of the front row of the audience. There were older ladies that when I started to read that, they all went, leaned right back away from the stage. Because to hear me talk, you wouldn't have thought that was going to come out of my mouth. So it is sometimes fun to play to the darker, scary side, because people don't expect it when they see little old me wandering past. Yeah.
Right, well, moving on to your second reading. This will be from your two pamphlets, Love is the Way Bark Grows and I've Grown Two Hearts. And I think it's worth mentioning before hearing those poems that you title yourself as a poet and a mum. And I see motherhood as part of like your identity as a person, but also as a writer. And I wondered why motherhood is such a central theme in your writing.
Since becoming a mum, I stopped working, because I used to be an administrator at my old university and a librarian assistant at the local college where we were living at the time, and sort of just became a mum full time. So there was quite a few years there where that was me, and just that's all I did. I did suffer with awful pregnancy, the second one. I had the pelvic disorder where you can't walk. So I was in a wheelchair while I was pregnant with my second child, and there isn't a big gap between them. So my son was a baby and I was heavily pregnant and I couldn't walk, so I couldn't lift him. So I couldn't go shopping or take him out in his pram. And I kind of got locked in at home, just me being a mum at home. We didn't really go out very far because once I had my daughter, I was very scared to go out, postnatal depression issues, just really frightened of not being able to walk and not being able to get them back home. Luckily, I can walk again now, it's all good. But we moved back to where grandparents are, so there's more support up here than where we were when they were born. They were born in Bath. So yeah, I guess just being stuck in with them made it. That's what I had to write about, because that's all I was experiencing for quite a few years there, until they went to school. And once we moved back to Duckenfield when my daughter was 1. So once the older one started to go into nursery, so we're talking 4, 5, I had to go out the house because I had to take him and I had to come back. And it's amazing how in that short space of time from starting school to him being 6, how much I was like, oh, I'm so much better. And now I'm a beaver leader as well. So that's brought me out my shell even more, which is lovely. So I get to go and hang out with them on a Friday.
It's really interesting actually to hear about the challenges within motherhood, because a lot of mothers, feel the pressure to maintain that narrative that it's all plain sailing, and it can actually be really comforting to hear stories otherwise.
Yes.
And so, I'm going to hand over to you for your second reading.
Lovely. So I'm going to start with Love is the Way Backwards, which is my Half Moon book. And I'm going to start with one. So when we were in Bath, when we first bought our house, we couldn't afford the rent on our own, so we had to have lodgers. And this one is inspired by the last of lodgers going away and it being our house again. Oven. I am keeping my head down, busy. From the other room, I can hear the dim bustle of packing, cases dragging as the last of the luggage is carried out. Voices discussing directions, offering help, and the stiff politeness that happens when a favour is being borne but not wanted. I am staying out of the way, cleaning the oven, my hair tied back, leaving the neck bare, where I bend towards the glut of fats, greasy brown residues, dark smears and nodules of burnt embers that were once food. I imagine each thick rind is an argument I can scrape away. I am cleaning. In the other room, the lodgers are leaving. The oven is returning towards bare metal, and my house returning to my home. This next one is the editor of this book. She said it was her favourite, so I like to read it for her. But it's a postmodern poem, which is a poetry sculpture. So you take a book or whatever and you sort of just pull out words and then you try and make a poem around the bits and pieces that you've pulled out. And you can pull them from different places. This is just from one book. The Curb Alongside. After the Hours, Michael Cunningham. A woman, stationed precisely between statues of George Washington, faces destroyed by weather, the crush and heave, endless, dug beneath the sturdy squalor, the visible lunatics, stunned, baffled, fleshless, blazing with lesions, the pungent meaty smoke, the bleat and the strum of 3 boys and a girl chasing pigeons. A quick spatter of an awkward moment, she turns her mouth away, offering her cheek a corner of reluctant reflex. And then the next one is the title poem. And this one is the only love poem I've ever actually written for a real person. So this one's for my husband, and it waited a long time, bless him. It only took me 17 years to find the words to write this one. Love is the way bark grows. The iron railing is stoic, peeling and rusty, endlessly on from there to there, immovable until it crumbles away. The tree slowly grows, expanding to fill by inches, incremental, from a hug's width to arms thrown wide, barely grasping the sides. Roots dig deep, move like breathing, earth tumbling, grain by grain, up and out in ridges. And in time, those iron railings kink just a little. The trunk is shrugging out, inching closer till it stands shoulder to shoulder, railing and tree, each leaning on the other, and somehow, leaning, growing, nudging, bark becomes woven through. The railing and tree fused, messily stitched by the bark, slowly working its way around and over and through, and smoothed out over time, so neither really notice. It does cause a few discussions as to who's the bark and who's the tree, who's the tree and who's the railing, but I don't actually know which one's which. And then the last one, it's another grandmother poem. And this one came about because my grandmother died whilst I was at university. It was exam time, so I couldn't make it back when she was poorly, and I couldn't make it back for the funeral either. So this is sort of the guilt that I felt of not being able to come back for it. I should have brought them sooner. The sound of petals falling, it was the only sound that would make me take the 3-minute walk to visit you in that place. The smell of Dettol creeping into me, my mouth full of the taste of it, mixed with urine and dust. The sound of petals, pink hibiscus and fat lupins. The sound of colours dripping back down the stems, running like dye into the water, stagnant in the vase. There are petals on the pavement as I walk along the avenue of white flowering trees outside the care home. I linger, listening to the way each petal strikes the stone. I let the flowers I have brought shed a few more petals, mix pink with white. I bring you flowers already wilting, flowers that will die before you do. Okay, and then the next few are from I Have Grown Two Hearts, which is my hedgehog one. And these are the ones that are all about motherhood. And my two children actually say they quite like this one because it's about them, so that's good. They might not feel the same once they're older and read it. But so this is for Torin, my son, and Nimue, my daughter. I have grown two hearts. I have given over half of myself twice. Cells seemingly endlessly divisible, splitting and coalescing to grow two hearts, two rib cages, fingers and toes, eyelashes and curls. My thoughts have taken my blood and bones, spun them into life, tucked them in, snug under my sternum, two perfect imaginations, kicking as they dream. This next one is a poem that I wrote based on a memory of a visit, and I've got two dads, but for this poem I've just made them into one. They were both at the visit though, and it's a visit to Chatsworth house, so it's actually the marble lions there it's based on, but that didn't work for a poem. Image on a brass lion. I catch a glimpse of us, merged for a moment on a curve of lion. The arch of its back forces our two faces to swim together. Two Roman noses, each with a nub of bone along the ridge. Our eyes, once two separate sets of blue, mine periwinkle and watery, yours ink on parchment, are now combined. And for a second, I see with your eyes, and I become the father, gripping his daughter's hand. This next one is one for my daughter, and it's one of the newest ones in terms of when it was written in the book, because it's about her growing up and having to teach her how to brush her own hair now, because she's getting to the point where she's a bit too old for me to do it every morning. Plaiting Rapunzel's hair. I brush your tangles, grown so long now, not the wild baby curls, so tightly wound they barely bounced, tucked close around your ears. They tumble down your back, longer than they've ever been. I brush as you bounce on the balls of your feet, never still. I tease out each knot, brush to drown out my quiet thoughts. Brush, capture. I'm not quite ready to let you go yet. I brush again, slick out the tiny tangles, brush in the shine. Brush, capture, plait. Slide in bobby pins. I never know which way up the smooth side should be. Coil and catch your curls, secure in place. Watch the wispy bits escape. Still my wild girl. Soon I must teach you to brush your own hair. My final poem is, it's a brand new form that the Northern Poetry Library asked people to write poems to for its 50th birthday. So it's an 821, which is the Dewey Decimal number for poetry in the library. And this one's based on moving home from Bath back to Duckenfield. Northbound. My babies were born in the south. Now we are all packed in a van, inching along the M5 northbound. Our house packed in boxes, half neatly labelled, half thrown in anyhow. Nuts and bolts rolling free in the bottom. Reassembling furniture promises to be interesting. My babies sleep amongst favourite toys, unaware of their shift in gravity, this homecoming. Their roots are unearthed, about to be repotted. A lorry is on the hard shoulder, cab ablaze. As we crawl past, this moment is seared into my memory. We pass and race away homewards, while behind us the road is closed.
So that was a brilliant reading. And I have a few questions. I noticed how the reading, it began and it ended with this idea of the home. And to begin with, your house is returning to your home as you clean your oven. And then at the end, all of your belongings are bundled in a car and you're heading northbound to your other home, your original home. And I wondered what home means to you, if that is even possible to answer.
Yeah, home for me is where you feel safe. And it's all too easy, especially over these last 2 years, to stay at home and never go anywhere ever again. I've been there, done it once, I can do it again. But I always feel at home, and this is probably a weird answer, but for me, if I can look outside when it's dark and I can see Ryan's belt, I feel like I'm at home, because where I grew up, if you stood on the doorstep, the back door, because we never used the front door, we only ever used the back door, which must be a northern thing, you could see Orion in the sky pretty much. Well, it can't have been all year round because he does move, but I always remember seeing that outside. So I always feel at home when I can see that one constellation, which is probably not everyone's idea of home.
I love that though. I really, really love that. And then, so as we've said, there's a lot of the reading was about being a mother, and in the poem Plaiting Rapunzel's Hair, there's like that heartbreaking notion of having to watch your daughter grow up and let her go.
Yes.
And I wondered if you think you can ever fully let go of that role of mother and carer.
I don't think you can, because I mean, my mum's still around, and my husband's mum's still around, and we definitely need them. There's always that phone call, Mom, how do you, whatever the question might be, how do I cook this, or what ingredients to put in that for his mum, because she's brilliant at cooking.
Yeah.
And for mine, it's like any sort of craft thing that I'm doing. I occasionally will be like, Mum, how do you, which glue do you use for this, or what tool's the best for that craft, because she's crafty like me. Or every Saturday, Sunday, we used to have the tradition before all this came about, that I'd go on a Saturday to watch a favourite programme at mum's. I'd go sit on the floor and watch it next to her, because she's disabled, so she's got a special chair that lifts up and everything. And the best place to sit to see the telly is right at the floor of her chair. So I'd go and watch my favourite programme with her every Saturday. So the last few years have been a bit miserable, because I can't go and do our Saturday tradition.
Yeah. Also, I especially in the poems, I think it's I have grown two hearts and image on a brass lion. There's this sense that you are completely indivisible from your children. You can literally see yourself in them. And I wondered if you felt you've become more or less yourself since becoming a mother? It's like you're divided into other people. Does that take away from yourself, or does that make you, you sort of, that has become who you are?
No, actually, I'm a bit of a daddy's girl, so I see myself in both of my dads. I've got my dad that made me, and then my other dad. I call him my brain dad, because I don't like the word stepdad, and I don't like half brother and half sister, because all of my brothers and sisters are half, and that makes it feel like they're half a person.
Yeah.
So I always just call it brother, sister, mum, dad. That's it. You've got that. I don't care if you're in-law, step, half, or what. You're family or you're not. And so yeah, I have found myself at times saying something, doing something. Whoop, that's my dad talking. So I think you do take on your parents, because the same. Now my son, I see myself in a lot, because he does look like me and act like me and talk like me. My daughter looks exactly like her dad's sister. So she doesn't look instantly like mine, because she's got these blonde curls, and I mean, I'm a brown-haired girl and I've never been blonde. These blonde wild curls that have come from the other side of the family, and I'm like, how are you mine? Because her attitude is, she's a very pink girly girl. Not a pink girly girl, but then she trips over and I'm like, there I am.
Yeah.
Or she'll say something, I'm like, yeah, that's me there.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really nice connection. And so I've had so much fun hearing your poems and learning about, your takes on motherhood as well, and your observations of it. So thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Poet and for sharing your work. To everyone watching at home, do sign up to the Homestage poetry mailing list to be notified about all future poetry events like these. The link will be below, and you can catch up on all of our previous guests on our YouTube channel. In case you didn't know, at Homestage we also run online Zoom meetups within each interest group. There are still spaces on our 2 latest poetry groups. There's a writing workshop, and there is a group to share and discuss poetry written by others. You can sign up to both through the links in the description if you'd like to take part. Thank you so much again to you, Zoe. That's all for now. I'll see you all next time.